to be very clear, this sample also has a very high percentage distribution of what the market most highly values, which is the magnet feed material. And that is one of the natural facets of the Ashram deposit that we have, in that it has such a high percentage of the magnet feed material.
Hello to viewers tuning in to Assay TV. We're catching up with Commerce Resources today about their rare earth metals exploration and development projects in Canada. And I'm pleased to be speaking with Chris Grove, President and Director of Commerce. So Chris, really good to be speaking with you again.
Great to be speaking with you, Adam. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, and perhaps I should have said, Chris, that actually the rare earth producer, because we've got some new news that you can take us through around new production, please.
Well, thank you very much, Adam. And yes, we are very excited today to have released the milestone news on the first production of a commercially marketable sample of rare earth carbonate from our Ashram rare earth element and fluorspar deposit in Quebec. This essentially is the culmination of the last year of work on the process flow sheet, which has the work has been done primarily at Hazen Research in Golden, Colorado. And we're very excited by the production of this very small amount of material, which was satisfactory to the industry majors who have requested this sample from us. And to be very clear, this sample also has a very high percentage distribution of what the market most highly values, which is the magnet feed material. And that is one of the natural facets of the Ashram deposit that we have, in that it has such a high percentage of the magnet feed material. And so at this point in time, our next goal is to then bulk through a significant amount of material in the pilot plant to then produce the actual samples for delivery to these industry majors. But we're very excited about today's news. Thank you.
Excellent. Could we delve into a little bit more specifically around the findings of the sample? Indeed, you've talked about it being sort of the larger magnetic feed material, a large proportion of that, but can you talk more completely about some of the metallurgy within this sample?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about 21.6% neodymium praseodymium, and NdPr, both neodymium and praseodymium, are two of the three rare earth elements that are used in magnet manufacturing that have also tripled in value in the last 10 years. And the most significant increase in value for those three rare earth elements have come really in the last year, which is really quite incredible. That does speak to the ongoing increased global demand for rare earth elements against major issues on the supply side. Now, in terms of this rare earth carbonate, and some viewers will remember that we did produce a rare earth element sample a year ago, and that specifically was a mineral concentrate. And so it still had the very low level of thorium left in that sample. And that was specifically produced for another industry major. But this sample, or the samples we're about to produce, are different in that they are thorium free. And so we are able to send samples of this material, this rare earth carbonate, to anywhere in the world. So ultimately, this then speaks to the requests that we have received from so many different current processors and processors looking to get into commercial operation. And on that list would be Solvay Rhodia, who were the first company to request a sample from us in 2014. And then other companies, international companies like Less Common Metals in the UK, Rare Earth Salts in Nebraska, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a growing, a greatly increasing demand for this kind of material, which we just produced today. But if I haven't addressed any specifics that you were thinking about, do let me know.
Great. So what are the next steps to scaling up? Are you going to have more sampling and more assay results to come, or are you going to be scaling up this specific production sample?
Yeah, the next step would be to ramp up production of this exact material. So to be very clear, we sent the analytical assay of this sample to the majors. We're then going to produce a larger sample for right now at our pilot plant at Hazen Research, excuse me, in Golden, Colorado. So that is the next priority for us, producing a larger sample size for these majors.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, well, zooming out a little bit from this really interesting good news around the production, there's a lot of supply chain disruption going on globally that we know about. There's a war going on in Ukraine, sanctions around Russian commodities and exports indeed. How has this impacted the outlook in the rare earth market from your perspective?
Well, I would say that there's a very significant kick to the psyche for everyone in terms of the current atrocities in the Ukraine, in terms of companies and countries looking to make sure that they have a stable source of the resources they need to operate. And in specifics, Russia doesn't play a very significant part in the world's production of rare earth elements, but they are responsible for producing somewhere just under 10% of the world's supply. And that does go to a processor in the European Union. So I would suggest that that is more challenging at this point in time for Russia to continue to sell their rare earth element production to anyone outside of Russia. The other side of it is that, already industry have really had a focus for 17 years about finding stable sources of rare earth elements. And that then speaks to ultimately the challenges that rare earth elements have in terms of proving up positive economics. At this point in time, to be very clear, we are very active on our second economic report. Our first economic report, which was released 10 years ago, had very positive economics, and we've been optimizing the process flow sheet since that time. And we are looking forward to releasing our pre-feasibility study later this year.
Excellent. We're looking forward to hearing a bit more about that. And so on top of the macro and geopolitical issues that you mentioned globally and the sort of state of the market there, last we spoke, there was some overbuying in the market, basically in 2021, I recall. What's the sort of state of the global rare earth element market beyond just what's going on in the near term, the supply-demand balance globally?
Well, I think the appreciation of rare earth element prices generally over the last 9 or 10 months has been more a clear indication of continued increased global demand against major issues on the supply side. And to be clear, in the last 17 years, and I date this back to 2005 when China imposed their export duty on rare earth elements, which was later in 2012 declared illegal by the WTO. But that imposition in 2005 really kickstarted the opportunity for companies to become ideally an alternate source of supply to China. And in that 17 years, there's really only been one successful new entry into the rare earth element production scene, which is Lynas in Australia. So in terms of that continued increased demand, and the global demand for rare earth elements has better than doubled in the last 10 years, that I think then speaks to the current level of prices. And the very steady positive trajectory of price appreciation over the last 9 or 10 months, I think is more indicative of the fundamentals of demand and supply, and as opposed to other periods in the last 10 years when you saw price spikes and then prices falling into an open elevator shaft. And part of that was potentially more companies hoarding material at a certain point in time before prices got too high, and then it was seen that demand had fallen off. in the last 9 or 10 months, with the prices just steadily appreciating, I think this speaks to a continued increased demand. And certainly, I mean, you can hardly open a newspaper or open your browser without seeing some news on some company increasing their activities in terms of the clean and green world. You know, General Motors looking to build so many more electric vehicles in the next several years. You know, MP Materials constructing a 200,000 square foot magnet manufacturing facility in Fort Worth, Texas. I mean, the increased number of sales of EVs, I think this year is going to be amazing, and I think it's very clear that everyone can see this trajectory happening in front of them right now.
Absolutely, and if we think about the oil price and the energy crisis that's ongoing, it's added fuel for the fire, if you like, for renewables as well as cleaner modes of transport. EVs being the demand driver, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, and I can imagine, you know, shareholders of Suncor and Exxon, you know, celebrating today and cracking open champagne due to the current prices of oil and gas. But ultimately, that does increase the pressure or increase the attractiveness of EVs. So yes, I think, you know, we're going to see a very interesting transition, a much more significant transition over to EVs in 2022 and in the future.
Excellent. Just on that point around sort of greening our society, thinking with the clean conscious hat on here, rare earth elements are known for the intensity of the refining process and production process, both in terms of sort of tailings, waste management, and energy. What do commerce do perhaps differently, or in terms of staying ahead on these criteria?
Well, you know, I first would like to make a point that rare earth mining and rare earth processing is not inherently more environmentally degrading than really any other commodity. It's
Right.
more complicated, but historically, and unfortunately, a lot of journalists have remembered this and have, you know, trundled out this story that rare earth elements are dirty somehow. That is only true historically with the most egregious producers, which were Chinese. And so the Chinese operations, and I have to give some props to Beijing at this point in time, because Beijing, in the last couple of 5-year plans, they've done an incredible job in shutting down what they would call illegal miners, but also the most egregious polluters. And so that has really changed the balance of production globally. So China historically was the largest net exporter of rare earth elements and also a fluorspar. But in the last 4 or 5 years, China has become a net importer of both fluorspar and rare earth elements. And it is specifically because Beijing has shut down the most egregious polluters in that country. And
Right.
so in what we are doing here, Commerce Resources has been awarded already what is called the E3 Plus Award for the highest practices, highest and best practices in terms of the environment and social issues. And that is the way we will proceed. So in terms of the Ashram project in Nunavik, we will be doing everything at the best and the highest levels to satisfy all the rules and regulations for the environment and social issues as we advance the project.
Yep, absolutely. And Quebec, of course, a great province to be leading in that respect for mining projects. Very good on cleaner sources of power, cleaner practices and processes. So that's great to hear about the E3 Plus Award.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, Chris, just for investor viewers then, let's sum up. What's the milestones for this year? What are your next key points in ramping up this production?
Yeah, so the next key points would be the production and delivery of the samples following the specifications of the sample we produced in news release today. And those samples should be out to industry in the next 3 to 4 weeks thereabouts. And we're very excited about that. Ultimately, whether or not we're successful in an industry partnership, I can't say, because we need the onus is upon us to deliver these samples. Following that, there are so many other requests for sample material from us. Ultimately, we will continue down that list as we proceed in 2022. While at the same time, all activity is going on to finish our second economic report, the pre-feasibility study, and that should be out in early Q4 2022, or at least that's our estimate at this point in time, with a recognition that we still are being affected by an industry backlog at the assay labs. We had drill results out on March 1st, 2022, and the turnaround time for those drill results, excellent drill results, the turnaround time was somewhere around 18 weeks. So the industry right now is busier than it has ever been in the last 20 years, essentially. And unfortunately, the assay labs have this backlog, which arguably is related to the pandemic in terms of a lack of human resources. So we are optimistic to get our pre-fees out in Q4 of this year.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah, certainly an industry-wide challenge for all metals producers in terms of the assay results. And we wish you luck with staying on top of those and getting on top of it. So, Chris, thanks for sharing an update on Commerce's current great production news. And we look forward to hearing a little bit more around the PFS and further production capacity later on this year. Thanks for speaking with Assay TV.
Excellent. Well, it was a real pleasure speaking to you, Adam. We're very excited about today's news, as I've said already, and we are certainly interested in speaking to you again. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
My pleasure.